So our next two systems we're about to talk about, we just have 3 body systems left to discuss in this unit. So the next two are very closely related and almost can be considered a part of the same system. So we'll talk today about excretory system and then move on to the respiratory system. But the excretory system it comes from the word excretion. And excretion means to remove waste that our body produces as it metabolizes food, as it obtains energy, all the little chemical reactions that happen as part of our metabolism. Well, many of them produce waste products, which, if they were to build up, would be dangerous to us, could sort of poison us. So our body has several organs that help us to remove those waste products so that they don't become dangerous. And that's what the excretory system helps to remove those waste products. So some of the main organs of the excretory system include the kidneys and then the associated organs that go along with them. And the excretory system, the waste products that I'm referring to, that it gets rid of things like carbon dioxide, okay, nitrogen wastes, okay, which come from the breakdown of proteins. Sweat is another example of which contains salts and other nitrogen compounds. So we need to get rid of all those things. One of the main organs that does this are the kidneys. Okay? The kidneys are excretory organs which take toxins out of our blood, mix those toxins with some water to form urine. So our kidneys, we have 2 kidneys. They're on our back side of our bodies, our dorsal side, either side of our spine. I'll look for it later. I used to have a preserved kidney. I'll show you. No. And the kidneys, basically all the blood in our body makes its way to our kidneys at some point through arteries called the renal arteries. And they send the blood to the kidneys, and the kidneys basically take out the poisonous compounds that are in our blood, save the stuff that's still helpful to us, beneficial. The harmful stuff that gets mixed with water to form urine, and then sends that urine along. Okay? So once the blood goes through the kidneys, goes in through an artery, goes through the kidney, comes out through a vein, and the kidneys take those wastes, mix them with water, and then they send that urine through a tube that's called the ureter. The ureter basically takes a constant drip of urine that's produced by the kidneys and brings it to the urinary bladder. So you see in this diagram, we have the 2 kidneys, one on each side. You can see the arteries that lead to them. The urine goes through, this is the ureter, goes down and stores that urine in the bladder until it's ready to be eliminated. So there's nerves around the bladder that tell when it's getting filled up. And those are the nerves that tell our brain that we have to urinate pretty soon. Once that time comes, okay, there's a muscle obviously that keeps the bladder closed. And then as that urine stores up, eventually when it's eliminated during urination, it comes out through another tube that's called the urethra. Urethra carries that urine from the bladder, out of the body, and hopefully into the toilet.
Hopefully.
Those are sometimes called the parts of the urinary system. They're all parts of the excretory system. So, sort of a diagram. We don't have this slide, just to sort of show you. Our cells produce waste products as they go about their normal metabolic processes. The blood absorbs those waste products through diffusion, takes them away. That blood eventually makes its way to the kidneys. Kidneys filter out those substances, those waste products from the blood. The clean blood can continue on into circulation. Waste products get mixed with water to form urine, travel through the ureter, and then eventually to the bladder and out through the urethra. And that's how our body eliminates many of the waste products that would be dangerous to us. There are times when the kidneys do not work properly. So some people could have kidney failure. Right? A kidney may stop working. Okay? And the kidney can stop working for lots of different reasons. Sometimes trauma to the lower back, like a physical impact, if somebody got in a car accident, something like that, can damage the kidneys physically and they don't work anymore. Sometimes a bacterial infection can affect the kidneys and damage them. Sometimes types of cancer can get into the kidneys and damage them. Uncontrolled diabetes, the blood sugar can damage the kidneys, or high blood pressure. There's lots of reasons the kidneys may stop functioning, but you have to have a functioning kidney to survive. You can live with just a single kidney. So if one of your kidneys were damaged and did not work anymore, you could live just fine with a single kidney and be perfectly healthy. But if you have no healthy kidneys, then you have serious health consequences. So one of the things, when a person has kidney failure and their kidneys are not working properly, they can be temporarily helped in the process of dialysis. So when a person's kidneys are malfunctioning, they will need to go to the doctor's office pretty much every day, and they hook up their blood supply through a vein to a machine, which is called a dialysis machine. This dialysis machine basically acts as like an artificial kidney. It takes the blood into it through diffusion and osmosis, removes the toxins, and then puts that clean blood back into your body. So it's sort of taking the place of the kidneys. It actually doesn't work as well as a real kidney does, okay? But it can keep a person alive for an extended period of time, because what are they eventually waiting for? Person's kidneys are malfunctioning. Yeah, they're waiting for a transplant. Often a person whose kidneys have shut down and neither one are working is waiting for a kidney transplant. So kidney transplants can come from a living person. Sometimes a family member may donate one of their kidneys, one of their healthy kidneys, to another family member who has kidney failure, because the person donating the kidney can live just fine with a single kidney, and then the person that needed it can live with the donated kidney. Other times they may get a kidney donation from a person who's donated their organs after they pass away. That's something that people can elect to do. So a spot on your driver's license where you say, I would like to be an organ donor. And then if a person dies in an accident or some other way, the doctors try to find which of their organs can be used to donate to somebody else to help with various health conditions. And kidneys are one of those. Jordan?
I think my uncle's on dialysis, but he does it at home. He has a machine at
Oh,
home.
home dialysis?
He hooks up to his side. I don't know.
Could be.
His side. I think it's dialysis because he needs a kidney transplant.
Yeah, then probably it is. Yeah, and that dialysis is helping him stay healthy until he can eventually get it. A kidney transplant is a more permanent solution than dialysis, right?
I've heard you get a lot of money if you donate a kidney.
No, it's illegal to pay for an organ in the
Oh.
United States. You can't sell organs. So again, here's what it sort of looks like. They take the blood out of a vein, okay, goes through some equipment, through a dialysis unit, back into a person's body, and the blood has been cleansed at that point. Our skin is also considered an excretory organ, okay, because sweat glands in our skin remove some amount of waste from our bodies. Sweat is not just water. Right? So if you go out and you have track practice and you're running around the school and you're sweaty, that sweat is a mixture of water, salts, urea, and nitrogen waste that our kidneys also get rid of. All that stuff comes out in our salt. You may notice, like if you ever, if you play a sport, like say you play baseball and you're always wearing a baseball cap when you're playing baseball and you're sweating all the time, then once that sweat dries, what's left in it? Maybe you never exercised or something. Yeah, like a white, crusty layer, that's salt. because the liquid part of our sweat evaporates and you're left with the salt. Okay? Or if you are, you're running a long distance, you're sweating a lot, then the sweat as it evaporates on your skin, you might have salt on your skin from the sweat that evaporated. But really, the main function of sweat glands is to help regulate our temperature. As we sweat evaporates from our skin, and that requires heat, and so it helps to cool us down. And then our lungs. Our lungs are an important excretory organ. What waste product do our lungs get rid of? Carbon dioxide. When carbon dioxide is in our blood, it makes our blood acidic. And if it builds up too high, our blood becomes too acidic, and that becomes dangerous. And so our lungs remove that carbon dioxide. And we've looked at this diagram before when we talked about the circulatory system. As the blood travels to our lungs, it goes through those little air sacs called alveoli. As the blood travels next to these alveoli, again, carbon dioxide that was dissolved here diffuses into the air. Oxygen from the air diffuses into the blood, and then that blood gets exhaled afterwards. And that blood can go back into circulation, delivering that oxygen and picking up new carbon dioxide from other cells. And that brings us to the respiratory system, because the lungs are also part of the respiratory system. And as you guys said in our question today, our lungs' purpose, their function, okay, is to provide the body with what?
Air.
Yeah, let's be careful about that term, air. Because air, what is in, when we breathe in air. What's in air?
Oxygen,
Some oxygen, but actually most of it's not oxygen.
carbon dioxide.
Some carbon dioxide, but a very small percentage is carbon dioxide. Anyone know what most air is actually, which gas it's made of? Nitrogen. It's mostly nitrogen.
I'm so smart.
Our lungs also remove carbon dioxide from our bodies. And we breathe in and out in order to provide our blood with oxygen and to get rid of carbon dioxide. Now, in order to inflate and deflate our lungs, we have a special muscle that's kind of stretched within the rib cage. So you see the rib cage here. This is the shape of the diaphragm. It's kind of like an umbrella tucked up inside of the rib cage. And so the diaphragm is a muscle, and as it contracts, okay, it creates a difference in pressure, which fills our lungs with air.
Isn't it a heart?
And as it relaxes, causes us to exhale. So this is a model of our lungs. So we have a little tube which represents what is the, so as we breathe in, where does air travel through? Not our esophagus. Hold on. Our esophagus is where what travels through? Food. A separate tube from our respiratory system. What's the one that carries air? It has another name.
Wait, what does it
It
start?
what's that?
What does it start with?
Starts with a T.
Tube.
Okay? It's the trachea. You might have heard it called your windpipe. That's what this represents, this tube. This tube branches, our trachea goes into our chest. It has two branches called the bronchi. And then those bronchi split into smaller and smaller tubes, eventually ending in alveoli. At the bottom is our diaphragm, this muscle. And this balloon represents that muscle. And what you see is as this diaphragm contracts and pulls down, listen, you could hear air coming into our lungs. Because what happens is the pressure decreases in this cavity, and that forces air from a higher pressure out here into, okay? And then when you let go,
Wait, can you feel the air coming out from
it's not a lot of air. There's a hole in the balloons inside. What's that?
the Wait, can you actually?
You don't need to force air into this. So you don't need to something blowing air into your lungs, you create a low pressure inside your chest cavity, higher pressure forces air into your lungs. So that's how our lungs work, by this diaphragm contracting, causing our lungs to inflate, relaxing, and we exhale. Inhale, exhale. I guess if you want, don't break the balloon.
Wait, I want to. Wait, we're in the middle of the room. I thought the corner in his nose and put out his mouth and he no, he actually does. Wait, I have a question.
So, if we think about a couple things, we have this handsome young man,
Yeah.
He's pretty young.
and let's talk about breathing versus respiration, because we sometimes might use those words interchangeably, but they don't actually mean the same thing. When we talk about breathing, we're talking about taking air into our lungs and expelling it. That's a mechanical, a physical process of getting air into our lungs. Okay? Respiration, that term we talked about back when we talked about cell processes, is the process of getting oxygen into our blood, into our cells, and then the cells use that oxygen for cellular respiration. So, Emily just said this a minute ago. The air that we breathe in, right now, as you take a breath, the air you breathe in is about 78% nitrogen. The vast majority of the air is nitrogen, but we don't use it. We can't use it, the nitrogen that's in the air. Okay? It goes into our lungs and we breathe it right back out with the same concentration. So our bodies don't absorb any of that nitrogen. Oxygen, on the other hand, the oxygen in the air we breathe in is about 21%. When we exhale, what is that percentage? Looking at this chart. Look at this chart. What's the percent of oxygen we exhale? Okay? 17%. So we use some of that oxygen. Do we use all of it?
No.
No. The oxygen that we exhale still has plenty of, the air that we exhale still has plenty of oxygen in it. This is one of the reasons why when you give someone CPR and you exhale into their lungs, that can still provide them with oxygen because the air that we exhale still is 17% oxygen. What about carbon dioxide? The air we breathe in, it's actually much less than 1%, but we just rounded here. What happens to the air that we exhale in terms of carbon dioxide? It increases. We put air into that, and then we exhale it to get rid of it. So as we breathe in, we could breathe through our nose, obviously, or we could breathe through our mouth. They are both connected in the back of our mouth/throat in the area called the pharynx. So that's, what's that? That's why if you are drinking a soda and somebody makes you laugh, okay, and it goes up your nose, it really does, because the back of your throat is connected to your nose, and things can travel both ways.
Wait, I have a question. Can you breathe through your nose and through your mouth at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, I really
Try
do
it.
too. I have a question.
Yes, you
I
can.
didn't do it.
All right, Kaya.
She's like,
All right, shh.
And you're drinking soda, why is it like dirt? And it goes in your nose.
It's because there's carbon dioxide. So the reason you burp when you drink soda is so what you drink has a lot of carbon dioxide in it. That's what the bubbles are. When that gets into your stomach, some of the carbon dioxide comes out of solution, builds up in your stomach, and then every once in a while you let it come out through your esophagus and then you burp. But again, it's that carbon dioxide coming out. All right, so the nose has hairs in it. So there's a purpose to nose hair. Starch hair must be really healthy. And it acts as a filter. It filters out little bits of dust, pollen, stuff that's in the air. What's that?
Is that why you have to blow your nose?
So two things. You have hair in your nose, but you also have mucus. You might call it snot or boogers. It actually has a purpose. That sticky, mucusy stuff in your nose traps little bits of pollen, little bits of dirt, so that as you inhale through your nose, you don't get that stuff into your lungs.
What if you inhale it through your mouth?
It's okay. You could breathe through your mouth. You also have hairs along your trachea, and
Wait, you have hairs inside.
and they also can filter out you have mucus in your trachea and your lungs, and that's again to help filter out those little bits of contamination in the air. Air then travels through our windpipe, your trachea, in the front of your throat. It's reinforced with cartilage, has these rings of cartilage to make it nice and strong. Because if you damage your windpipe, if it gets clogged, if it collapses, if it swells up, then it can prevent you from breathing. And obviously, if you can't breathe, you can't live. Okay?
Really?
So the trachea leads from the back of your nose and your mouth down into your chest. It splits into two branches called the bronchi. Those bronchi then split into smaller tubes called the bronchioles. And eventually that leads to tiny little air sacs called alveoli.
Air sacs. Oh my God! Slow down.
Wait, we didn't get it.
What do you mean you didn't get
That.
it?
No.
The little thing.
Oh,
You just didn't feel it from me.
oh. I don't understand what you're saying. I thought you were talking about the nose.
Hold it like hold it like
So you may be familiar with the bronchioles, the bronchi, because they can get infected. And what do we call an infection of the bronchi?
Wait, is that
Bronchitis.
Bronchitis. If you ever have bronchitis and you're congested, you have difficulty breathing, okay? That's because of an infection and the buildup of mucus in those bronchi. They're lymphatic. So we talk about the lymphatic system or part.
Wait, what's in our content?
It's just tissue. It's lymphatic tissue. You can have them removed. Like my oldest daughter, she had her tonsils removed when she was younger. And when she was younger, when she would sleep, she'd always snore really loud. She had trouble breathing. Once she had her tonsils removed, she never snored
yeah,
anymore.
something I was too.
Yeah. And then finally, the end of the bronchioles end in those little clusters. They look like grapes or little heads of broccoli. Those are the alveoli. Those are the air sacs, which fill up with air. And that's where we absorb the oxygen, where we get rid of carbon dioxide.
Is this it?
Nope.
Wait.
And so having a functioning, working respiratory system is obviously very important. Okay? We need to always be breathing to oxygenate our blood. If our blood is not oxygenated, we can't survive.
What's the next one?
So, as we said, these alveoli, these little clusters filled with air, they're surrounded by tiny capillaries, which can then absorb the oxygen, get rid of carbon dioxide. This is from the body's exhibit again. This red tissue is the alveoli. You can see the two branches of the bronchi, which merge into the trachea up here. Air in, absorb oxygen, get rid of carbon dioxide, and then the air is expelled. You also have a special protection against choking. The top of your trachea, you have a small little flap that opens and closes. It opens as we inhale and breathe in to allow air in, but then it closes once we finish breathing. And it closes to prevent anything from getting into our trachea. What's it called when we get an object in our trachea?
Choking.
Yeah, that's what choking is. If you have a piece of food or some other object and it gets stuck in your trachea,
Wait,
it prevents air from getting down your trachea, prevents you from breathing, and therefore can be very dangerous. This flap keeps things out of our trachea. Now, it doesn't work perfectly.
Thank you.
Sometimes a person can choke on a piece of food. A piece of food, when they're swallowing, that flap doesn't close at the right time, and therefore a piece of food gets in there. You could help someone to expel that food by giving them the Heimlich maneuver, where you compress their abdomen and create some pressure to try to expel that. Emily?
How do you like choke on air or like?
You can't.
Oh wait, how do you choke or like how do you choke on your spit? Or, you know,
Anything other than air in your trachea is going to irritate it. Sometimes you might get some spit in your trachea, a little piece of food, or just something very small. And what does it cause you to do? Cough. Coughing is your respiratory system way of expelling stuff that might be in your trachea. Jordan?
You have two pipes, and if it goes on the wrong pipe, you start with choking.
Yeah, so you have two tubes going down your throat. One is your trachea, the other is your esophagus. One's supposed to keep food out. The other one, air can go into your digestive system and it's no big deal. Cause you to burn. There are lots of illnesses that affect the respiratory system. Smoking is a huge risk factor. Smoking, inhaling
It looks moldy.
tobacco, smoke, other types of smoke damages the lung tissue.
Why is it white?
Okay? These are healthy lungs from a non-smoker.
Oh.
These are the lungs of a lifelong smoker.
No.
And you can see the lungs get damaged over time. They lose their elasticity. The airways get constricted. Smoke contains carcinogens, substances that can cause an increased risk of cancer. Okay? And lung cancer is one of the most common forms of cancer that affects people, but smoking is a huge risk factor for lung cancer. So it's much more prevalent in people that do not smoke. Smoking doesn't guarantee that a person will get lung cancer. Not smoking doesn't guarantee that they won't get it, but it changes the risk drastically. Many of you have experience maybe with asthma or know somebody with asthma. Asthma is an inflammatory disease. It's when the airways of the bronchioles leading to the alveoli constrict. They become inflamed, they constrict. An asthma attack is when they really constrict and become very narrow, causing it to be much more difficult to take air into our lungs and leading to difficulty breathing. An asthma inhaler, okay, it's called a bronchial dilator. That's the name of what type of medicine that is. It helps to open those bronchioles back up when they are constricted. All right. Any questions about the excretory or respiratory system? Jordan?
My brother